What happens to the team I cheer for, the West Virginia Mountaineers? What happens to the other teams in the Big 12? What happens to the ACC schools that are not name brands if the SEC does decide to break away and do their own thing? What happens if the Big Ten decides to break away and do their own thing also? That's what we're talking about in today's episode, and I'm going to step further, and I'm going to show you a scenario I would like to see happen if those breakaways occur. So stick around and let's speculate together right after this. What is up, and welcome into this episode of Couz's Corner, your home for top shelf college sports talk surrounding the West Virginia Mountaineers and a little Big 12. Today we're talking conference realignment. It's the off season. There's not a lot of stuff going on, especially around college football. It's a great time to bring up some of these speculations, these possible scenarios, and talk about the future of college sports, specifically college football. And I'm going to take a page out of the book of the late, great Golden Blue dude, and we're going to enter the speculation zone today. For those of you who watched him, you know what I'm talking about. He used to love to come up with these scenarios, and he was great at it. He was so great at it, and he was very entertaining in the way he delivered it. But I might not be as entertaining, but I like to think that I have a decent idea here, okay? So let's talk about a scenario. Let's just imagine, okay, following the reports by Ross Dellinger that the SEC is actually in discussions amongst themselves about breaking away and doing their own thing so they can do their own governance, their own rulemaking, all of that, right? Have their own playoff, the whole bit. Well, in order to do that, they're probably going to need to expand, right? They probably want more than 16 teams. And you can imagine if the SEC does it, then the Big Ten's probably going to do it too. And they're probably going to want to expand it to more teams. They're probably going to pick off some ACC, maybe even some Big 12 teams. What if again, let's just humor me here and let's speculate together. If you don't like speculation, then maybe this show's not for you. This is just for fun. But let's speculate a minute, and let's just imagine that Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti want to keep the A4 teams in the boat with them, at the table with them, the P4 teams. Let's assume they want to keep all that intact. So they don't want to leave them stranded on an island. Now, the scenario I'm speaking of would not be good for the G5s. If you're a fan of a G5 team, I'm sorry. The scenario I'm talking about would not include your team. But it would include all the P4s. But let's just imagine that Petitti and Sankey decide, you know what, the SEC is going to do their own thing. They're going to have their own playoff, own governance. Big Ten is going to do it too. But we want to salvage all the teams in the A4, the autonomy for what is normally called the Power Four. They want to absorb all the Power Four schools in this new future of college sports. Could be football only, could be football and men's basketball, could be everything. We don't, I'll let you make that decision. And as a matter of fact, let me know in the comments as we go through this, do you think this is a great idea, a terrible idea, and what would you change about it after I show you what I have in mind? First off, let's go ahead and throw this up. This is what the scenario would look like if you put Notre Dame in the Big Ten, which a lot of people speculate that's eventually going to happen. Let's just say that Notre Dame goes to the Big Ten. Okay, this is what it would look like if that was the case. You've got the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, just as they are today. You've got the Big Ten just like it is today, with the addition of Notre Dame. That's your starting point. Okay, because we're not leaving Notre Dame out. They're too big of a brand to leave out. Let's go to speculate a little bit at what it could look like if the SEC and the Big Ten absorb the ACC and the Big 12. Keep them at the table. Keep all those schools with a Power 4 status, but do it with two conferences. That's what we're talking about, a P2 world that includes all power schools, all 68 power schools, including Notre Dame. Now, in this scenario, the Big Ten is able, for the most part, to maintain their high academic standards by absorbing schools, for the most part, who are either AAU status or at least have really high academic standards. Which means what? They're going to absorb the four corner schools from the Big 12. They're going to absorb Arizona, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado. All four of those schools it's my understanding at least that they are all AAU certified. And I know that's a big deal. And it's not a requirement for Big Ten, but I think it's something they really, really want from the president level, so they could do that. They could also absorb most of the ACC. They could absorb UVA, who's a great academic school. They could absorb North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Stanford, Cal, Wake Forest. NC State may not have the same level of academics, but they're a good academic institution, and it keeps that rivalry intact, which is another thing that they're absorbing teams for the most part here, and they can maintain the rivalries within these new leagues / conferences, whatever you want to call it. It might even need to change the names of these conferences. Now, I have BYU also going to the Big Ten because you want to maintain that Utah-BYU rivalry in the same league. Now, when you look at the SEC teams, it's the majority of the Big 12 teams, right? It's West Virginia, it's Cincinnati, it's UCF. It's all the Texas schools in the Big 12. SEC, yes, they care about academics, but it's probably not their top priority like it might be in the Big 10, or as high a priority, I should say. Now, if you can't see Cincinnati, it's because they're in black right here, and it's a black background on this graphic, so I apologize, but you see this little red line right here between Baylor and Houston? That is Cincinnati, okay? So if it's hard to see this, I apologize in advance, but you get my point. The SEC is able to maintain some form of regionality. You have Eastern schools and you have Southern schools, right, together. What's another thing you may notice if you're looking at this, especially if you're watching on a TV screen, again, if you're watching on a phone, I'll try my best to walk you through it. But you see it's mostly the old Big East. You have Virginia Tech, you have West Virginia, you have Miami, you have Louisville. I even threw Rutgers in here because I wanted to make it even 34-34. I threw Rutgers in the mix as well. That way the SEC gets the New York market if they want it. It might be a trade-off because they're not getting North Carolina that they want. So they might take – now, when I did this exercise – oh, and by the way, I also threw Boston College and Syracuse in the SEC as well. That way you can, as you'll see in a minute, you can kind of form some regional pods or some regional divisions within this league to make travel easier and whatnot. Because, again, SEC seems to care more about regionality than the Big Ten does. So I tried to keep that in mind when doing this. Now, if I had this to do over, I would probably switch out Rutgers and Nebraska. I would probably put Nebraska in the SEC and Rutgers in the Big Ten because I think they would each be better fits in those respective leagues, conferences, whatever. But for the sake of this exercise, Rutgers for now is in the SEC to help maintain some of that Northeast regionality with Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt. I've got Pitt in the SEC. Trying to maintain some rivalries. Now, the Big Ten, as you'll see, is more of a international league. But let's go ahead and break down, see what the divisions might look like in this new Big Ten. You have a division. Now, some of the divisions will have 8. You'll have 2 divisions of 8 and 2 divisions of 9 in each league, right? The divisions of 8 in the new Big Ten will be Florida State, Georgia Tech, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina State, North Carolina, Wake Forest, Virginia. It's basically you're the southeastern hub of the southeastern pod, the southeastern division of the league. That's the way I've got it here. Now, the Big Ten, this one was tough because of the international look of it. It was hard for me to get. I was trying to reduce travel as much as I possibly could for some of these divisions, but it was really hard for the Big Ten because they were spread out through the country. The second one, I've got mostly your Indiana, your Midwest, I guess you call it the Indiana pod, along with Minnesota, Wisconsin. Call it the Great Lakes pod if you want. You've got Notre Dame, Purdue, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Indiana, Northwestern, Illinois, and I threw Penn State and Maryland in there because I just needed a place to put them, and they didn't really fit anywhere else. So I threw Maryland and Penn State in that pod. Then I have a Western pod with Oregon, Washington, Cal, BYU, Utah, USC, Stanford, and UCLA. Again, I'm trying to keep rivalries within these pods as much as possible. I kept the Oregon-Washington rivalry together. I kept Cal and Stanford. I kept USC and Stanford. Utah, BYU, the Holy War. Cal and, again, UCLA and USC. I tried to maintain rivalries. In the pod I mentioned earlier, I've got the Minnesota-Wisconsin rivalry intact. I have Northwestern and Illinois. I think you see my point here. I've got Duke and UNC in the same pod. You see what I'm doing here, right? And then in the last pod, which was really tough, it's kind of more scattered out, but I have Ohio State, Michigan, because you want to keep them in the same pod. You also have Iowa, Nebraska, Michigan State. But then I threw in Arizona, SMU, Arizona State, and Colorado. SMU is kind of the outlier here. Maybe you figure out a way to trade them for another team and get them in this new SEC. But nonetheless, the way I worked it out, I thought, you know what? The Big Ten's going to want a presence in Texas. If they do this, there's going to have to be some trade-offs. The Big Ten's likely going to want a presence in Texas. They get it with SMU. Right? They already have a presence in Florida with Florida State. They might want a presence in Texas. They can get that with SMU, so I left them in with most of the other ACC schools. I've got like I mentioned, the four corners. I have 3 of the 4 corners in this pod. I tried to put Arizona State and Arizona with SMU because that limits their travel at least a little bit. And I doubt Ohio State and Michigan would love the idea of being in this pod with those Southwestern schools. But again, where else are you going to put them? Do you want to make it unfair and put Ohio State and Michigan in the same pod as Notre Dame? That wouldn't be – I mean, you're talking about having the toughest schedules. So where do you put them? It's just some of the geographics of this league would make it tough. Somebody's going to be the outlier here as far as geographically. So I did the best I could. But you get my point here. I'm trying to reduce travel as much as possible, maintain rivalries. And, again, you could play for the teams that have 8 teams in a pod. You play everyone in your pod once. You play teams from the other pod. From the other pod, you play 4 teams from the other – or 5 teams, I guess, from the other pods to get your 12 games. And then you play a conference championship or what, however you want to do. You can even have a postseason tournament. The winner of each pod plays each other in a semifinal and a final to determine your league champion or your national champion. You can't really call it national champion, but call it the Big Ten champion, whatever. And then the SEC would do the same thing, and here's what they would look like. It was a little easier to make the pods with the SEC because it was more regional, right? You have one pod, it's Alabama, Auburn, UCF, Miami, Florida, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Georgia. All of your far southeastern schools are in a pod together. Then your next pod is kind of your Oklahoma, Texas pod. You have Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Oklahoma State, Houston, Baylor, TCU, Texas Tech. So it's your Texas, Oklahoma pod. Reduces travel, keeps your rivalry. You have Bedlam in there. You have the Red River Shootout in there. You have TCU Baylor in there. And then the other pod I mentioned, you still have Alabama Auburn. You still have the Egg Bowl. You have Miami, Florida. A lot of good rivalries. Now, you go to the next pod, call it the Big East pod if you want. It's West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Boston College, Louisville, Pitt, Rutgers, Syracuse, and Cincinnati. If you see the little red line here on the dark background, that is Cincinnati. Call it the Big East pod. I don't care what you call it. But again, reduces travel for those teams. You have several good rivalry games in there with West Virginia, Virginia Tech, with West Virginia, Pitt, with West Virginia, Syracuse, with Cincinnati, Louisville. Syracuse, maybe Syracuse and Rutgers could be a rivalry, the 2 New York schools. But you see where I'm going with this. And then your last pod, you have Tennessee, Missouri, Kansas, LSU, Kansas State, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, Iowa State, and Kentucky. You have the you have the Iowa State, Kansas State rivalry. You have Tennessee, Vanderbilt rivalry. You have a Missouri-Kansas rivalry, the Kansas-Kansas State rivalry. You have Farmageddon with Iowa State, Kansas State. You see where I'm going. And again, they'll still have to play 3 or 4 or 5 schools outside of their own pod. So you could still have LSU, Alabama if you wanted. You could still have, Arkansas, Texas, if you wanted, whatever. You could have Kentucky could play Louisville. It's impossible to get every single rivalry taken care of here, but I think you see where I'm going with this. This would be, in my opinion, would be like a best case scenario for schools like West Virginia and Kansas State and Iowa State, and maybe like Wake Forest and Boston College and those teams of the world. Maybe even throw Pitt in that conversation. The Syracuses, the teams that are at risk of being left behind in the future of college sports, this would be a best case scenario. You have a 34-team league over here and a 34-team league over here. They each crown their own champion. Each pod, the winner of each pod is your 4 semifinalists. They play each other in a 14 playoff to determine each league's champion. Everybody has a chance to win a championship. And if you even want to have, at the end of that, you have the two winners of the Big Ten and SEC play each other, you can do that too if you want. There are a lot of different ways you could do this. And again, the teams I have here, you can debate those all day long of what teams should be put together. This SEC idea I really love. Again, I might switch out Nebraska for Rutgers, and then you might have to do a little bit of shuffling within the pods. But point being, this would be a pretty darn good pod here. Pretty darn good league here. A lot of great rivalries. You could have a rivalry game each and every week. I don't see why the networks wouldn't love this. You have enough inventory that ESPN could have some games, Fox could have some games, Warner Brothers could have some games, NBC could have some games, Netflix and Amazon could have some games. Everybody, there would be enough inventory for all the potential TV partners to get a piece of the pie. You'd have 68 really good 68 teams, your bigger brand. And if you want to do unequal revenue sharing to make it work for the higher brands, if you had to, I don't love that idea, but you might have to do it to make it work. But I think there would be enough inventory there to feed everybody. I mean, the NFL has 32 teams? Each one of these it'd be like 2 minor NFLs, but it would be college teams. You have your rivalry games intact. You have, to a degree, you have your regional travel intact. I don't know. Let me know what you think. Is this a harebrained idea? Again, you can flop teams around wherever you want, switch those around a little bit. Not really a matter, but let me know in the comments what you would change, if anything. Now, would this open the door for lawsuits from the G5 schools? Potentially. That's the only, would there be antitrust lawsuits filed by the G5 schools? That's a possibility. But hopefully there would be a way to do this to where you wouldn't have that happen. I don't know. And the G5 could do something similar, I don't know, and have their own championship. But nonetheless, if the SEC want to govern themselves and have their own rules, and the Big Ten wants to govern themselves and this is a way you can do that, yet still include all the other Power 4 schools. I don't know. Let me know. I haven't heard anybody else talk about this. Maybe they have, and I just haven't seen it. So I'm not going to sit here and say this is my idea, because it's probably not. But I actually think this is something we could work with in the future. And everybody could potentially make more money if you get enough media partners. Maybe even might have to bring in private capital partners to make it work. Might have to set up a third-party for-profit entity to make it work. I don't know. The nuts and bolts of it can be figured out later. But I just wanted to kind of give you the 30,000-foot view of where my mind is going, or where my mind has went over the last few days. So I decided to put these graphics together. I apologize if they were hard to see. TierMaker does allow you to change the background color to white on some of the graphics, but not all the graphics. So it's not the most user-friendly thing in the world, but me being my dumb, non-tech savvy self, I had to work with what I had. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section. If you're listening on podcast, please follow us and give us a 5-star rating. I want to give a quick shout out to my paid VIP channel members of this episode. These are the random shout outs we do for all members, all paid members, whether you're at the $2.99 level or the $4.99 level. The VIP shout outs of this episode are Houston Cougars Germany, Denny Allen, Shaggy of WV, Kevin Varney, and Big E7375. Thank you all for your paid VIP membership. If you want to be a paid member, you can hit the join button below. It's down on the, should be on the bottom right corner of your screen. There are 2 levels, like I mentioned. Obviously, the $4.99 level comes with some extra perks. All of that will be explained to you once you hit the join button and you're trying to decide what level you want to join. The perks will be explained to you. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. It really helps the algorithm. This time of year, views are down for all of us because it's not football season. The algorithm, help with that algorithm means a lot. So please thumbs up. Please like it. Please drop comments. That all helps us out. Hope you enjoyed this video where we entered the speculation zone a little bit. I started even throwing a tinfoil hat, but I thought that might be going a little too far, be a little too cheesy, so I didn't. But nonetheless, let me know what you think in the comments. I really appreciate you tuning into this episode. Hope the rest of your day's top shelf. God bless you. And cue Country Roads.